Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Rose, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. It's great to be here with you.
Great. So, Rose, my first question, you have a very interesting and sort of complementary background to what you're doing now with Patagonia Works. I'd love to hear, just for the listeners, a little bit of background about this somewhat contradictory Buddhist practitioner, yet expert in corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, and private equity. So for the listeners, would you give a brief overview of how you first came to Patagonia, this sort of personal and professional transformation?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting journey. I think anyone who reaches my age can look back over a 30-year span and say, "Wow, I had an interesting life, and my career took turns I didn't expect it to take." But I think in my mid to late 30s, I started feeling like I had become, successful by any measure. I was a public company CFO at the time in Silicon Valley, and but I was feeling like my day-to-day work really didn't line up with my values. And while it was interesting work, I didn't feel like I was doing anything really positive for the planet, for people, for community, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And at that time, I was also very deeply into my Buddhist practice, and all of those things kind of converged together. And I took some time off. I assessed my life. I think we all do that at certain points in our career. And during that time, the opportunity at Patagonia came up, and I felt like it would be an interesting journey, and at the very least, it would be fascinating to meet Yvonnie, because he's such a maverick in sustainable business. And that's how I ended up at Patagonia. I've been, initially the CFO, and then became the COO, and then the CEO of Patagonia Works and Patagonia Inc.
Great. And did you have a particular Buddhist teacher? I read something that you studied perhaps under Ram Dass and Pema Chodron or Jack Kornfield. Did anyone particularly spark a fire in you?
Well, Pema Chodron is really been the primary influencing teacher, I would say, in my practice. And part of that is she is so incredibly accessible, and I'm involved with the Rope Institute, which is a Buddhist college in Boulder, Colorado. I'm on their board of trustees, and she's aligned with that practice. And found her approach to be really practical. That it brought a lot of sanity and compassion and openness to my experiences, and it was a great set of tools for me to use, and I think it's been really helpful for me as a business person and as a leader.
Great. And so folks know your corporate finance background clearly had a positive effect on the creation of Patagonia Works. Would you explain what Patagonia Works is? I'm not sure many people know exactly what it is yet, and why it was important change in the corporate structure.
Yeah, I think, Yvonne and his family and the founding family are always looking at ways to up the ante for the environment, and ways that they can continue to enhance the mission, and I feel like Patagonia Works, which is really the thought behind it was there are lots of commercial holding companies, but what if we had a holding company that was for the planet, with the planet's interests at heart? And so that was really the sort of original thought behind it. And then we decided that one of the things that would make sense would be to deploy capital in a new way, to deploy capital in a more long-term way. And also, there is a real need to build infrastructure that is more friendly to the environment and less impactful on the environment. And you can't really do that unless you invest in it. And so we've spent time doing that in our own supply chain, and also supporting other businesses that we think are having positive impact on the planet. And that's sort of the overarching mission that we use. And then we looked at other areas that we felt like we could have the biggest impact, and really the biggest impact that we felt we could have in terms of the planet and soil health and the long-term health of biodiversity was to look at the food and agriculture world. And we came at that through Patagonia Provisions, which is a startup food company. We started it a few years ago. And the real focus of that business is restorative, regenerative agriculture, and so it's exciting to be able to expand the mission beyond what we've been able to do in apparel for the last 42 years, and prove the model again. And so we're all really excited about these different aspects of the business, and that's all converging with I think the B Corporation movement, which is also really exciting. So I think it's just a great combination of things going on, and it's a great time, I think, to be in business and be thinking about it in a different way.
I agree. And yeah, that's one of the core questions I had for you. I think, you went to COP21, and a business partner of mine is on Project Drawdown with Paul Hawken, kind of looking at the solutions that already exist for climate change. And the soil health seemed to be the sole, or not the only, but one of the most exciting pieces to come out of COP21. And so what sort of things are you looking at in terms of soil health within Patagonia?
Well, from a regenerative agriculture point of view, healthy organic soil sequesters more carbon. And so that's, I think, the exciting aspect of it as it relates to the issues of climate change. That the soil itself has the ability to sequester more carbon with more organic and regenerative processes. And there's a lot of folks talking about this now, and we're trying to bring this to light in a very vivid way by actually making products like our buffalo jerky with Dan O'Brien in South Dakota, where they've restored the grasslands there to their original native grasses. And instead of running cows on those ranches, they've just created a natural ecosystem with that keystone species there, and it's made all the difference. And I think, there are so many stories like that, from sustainable fishing that's going on, and highlighting, the folks that are doing it right, which are these small farmers or big dreamers who are really focused on creating a sustainable world that isn't, based on, a monoculture, or that uses, a host of poisons and destruction. I mean, we're right back at the beginning here on a certain level with, Rachel Carson and, these same kinds of issues. And I feel like it's not going to be changed by the big multinational corporations, but it is going to be changed by, these mid companies, these BCorp kind of companies that care about multiple stakeholders. And so it's a really exciting area for us, and we've met so many friends and companions along this journey as we look at this agricultural supply chain, and I see us only evolving that more and more as we've done on the apparel side of the business for the last 40 years.
Right.
Yeah.
I talked with Phil Graves. For the listeners who don't know, he's the director of corporate development at Patagonia's $20 million and change in-house venture capital arm. And the conversation with Phil was a little bit about this 25, 50, 100-year plan for Patagonia, because in a way, Patagonia is a little bit of a paradox where it's so far ahead. You guys are so far ahead of the competition, and yet you also sometimes get heat as, there's this feeling that, Patagonia should just solve the climate crisis because you're already so far ahead. But it seems like moving incremental efficiencies in the way that you make a socially responsible jacket, for example, Phil and I were talking about, that's not necessarily going to solve the crisis. So where do you see the other verticals, or perhaps it's more in regenerative agriculture, but where do you see the other verticals going in the sort of 50 or 100-year plan for Patagonia?
Well, I think there's no question, and I think this is really true coming out of COP21 and the 195 countries there that were, dealing with the reality of what 99% of scientists have agreed with. The planet's warming at a rate that is catastrophic. And I think there's no question that we cannot continue business as usual. And the idea that business gets a free pass, is not responsible for the destruction that it's doing to the planet, is completely outmoded. It's outdated. It's not going to create a future that we are going to want for our children and our grandchildren. And to me, that's sort of the underlying, concept. But as a business, I mean, we have to be looking at, what kind of, and we've been doing this for 40 years, what sort of innovations are really going to move the meter. And, organic cotton, we didn't move the meter. Or, only 2% of the cotton that's grown is organic. And, I want the other 98% to be organic, I don't want those pesticides going into the soils and into the watershed and, and harming biodiversity. And so there is this real need, I think, to scale these innovations that we know will have a great positive impact on the environment. So whether that's a recycled product or reclaimed product or low intensity, low impact products. And we are doing a lot in all of those areas. I mean, we just came out with a jean this year that uses 85% less water. Well, that technology was brought to very large jeanswear makers who all turned it down.
Right.
I think at a certain point, the bell has to ring for these other companies that, these resources are finite. And the companies that are looking for solutions are going to end up being the winners. And not only because they're going to end up being, I think economically the winners, but I think they'll be more beloved brands. And I think we've proved that. I think Yvonne proved that over the last 40 years.
Yeah. And do you think the food side, the provision side, could ever be larger than the clothing side at Patagonia?
Oh, I think there's a lot of potential for that, for sure. I mean, people need. I mean, it's funny. We make food, we make clothing. Our proposition around clothing is to make clothing that's incredibly durable. And I hear so many stories, and we have our worn wear program. Where people tell us the stories of their gear, and they might have it for 25 or 30 years, and send it to our repair center to be repaired. And you don't need to buy a jacket every day, but you do need to eat every day.
Right.
And I think that I see tremendous potential there. I mean, that we never look at the business through how fast we can grow or what size is the right size. I think we look at it from the point of view of the Zen archer, as Yvonne likes to say. We do everything right, and then we hit the target, and that's worked pretty well so far. So. And
were there any other solutions or things to note that came out of COP21 that you were particularly excited about as a solution to climate change?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think that first of all, I don't think we would have had the level of engagement at the very highest levels, and I'm talking about in the U.S. and China because they're the biggest emitters. I don't think we would have had the level of engagement we had at the presidential and prime minister level if there hadn't been the work of grassroots activists. I participated in the climate march in New York. I mean, there was over 300,000 people there. There have been a myriad of marches around the world. People standing up against coal plants being built. I mean, real grassroots activism, which I think made the powers that be, the entrenched status quo around governments and current infrastructure, to say, we need to be at the table and take this seriously. And I think that, and I also think Christiana Figueres did an amazing job. I think she's a hero in terms of pulling it off and getting all the right people to the table and giving a vision of an aspirational future, which is what we need. Instead of arguing about whether 99% of the scientists are right.
Right. And do you see there being a challenge? One of the thing I think within the B Corp community is sort of this the idea of story wars, where you can have, say, Monsanto or a large company go to COP21 and say, we're about regenerative carbon farming and sequestering carbon, and so I think there's some question about whether how do you really is it good that Monsanto is talking about carbon farming? I mean, or is it, does it short shrift the sort of mission-driven companies that have been doing it for a while? I don't really know the answer. I'm interested in what you think.
Well, I think that's always sort of been an issue, right? I mean, the level of, there's always a level of greenwashing or marketing that is maybe a little disingenuous, I think you have to consider the source, and you have to take it on a case by case basis, and I think that's part of the mix. It doesn't really, for us anyway, it doesn't really present a problem for us. I mean, we always kind of take this attitude of we're going to lead by example. We might be setting the highest bar, but that's okay. There needs to be a high bar to be set. And we're always comfortable in that position and sticking our neck out. and we have the ability to do that, I think, because we're a private company, run by environmental activists for the most part. So, I think that, while it can be disappointing, right, that sometimes that stuff just gets sort of co-opted and watered down or whatever the question might be. I don't think it changes the meaning in what the real work that's happening by people who really care. And honestly, I think the whole way of communication now, socially and digitally, it's pretty good at calling out the posers.
Right.
And it kind of happens naturally. It's interesting,
Especially with, I think you had mentioned it earlier, the BCorp certification, at least helping companies set themselves apart from the sort of greenwashing marketing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think anyone who joins that community, at least anyone that I've met who's joined that community, has a real curiosity and interest in learning from the other members of the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really positive direction for business to move in.
Yeah, and I must say thank you for your support of BCorps. It's very noticeable, and the whole community appreciates it. So thank you.
Yeah. I think Patagonia, even before the BCorp structure existed, I think Patagonia was sort of the original BCorp in a way.
Yes.
In terms of our social and environmental and community kind of based mission, and I think it's really exciting. I mean, it goes beyond certification, beyond a legal form, and it really is a movement. It's an exciting movement, and it's so great to meet the people in the community. And when I go and speak at colleges, it's like every student wants to go work for a BCorp.
Right.
They want to work for a place that they feel like really shares their values, and that they can feel connected to the company's mission.
Yeah. And do you think that, BCorps are an emerging phenomenon with large companies like Unilever said they want to become the largest B Corp in the world. Groupe Danone says they want to certify 10 of their subsidiaries. There's a large company called Laureate Education that's going to be the first publicly traded benefit corporation. Does that sort of fit into the 100-year vision that you see for Patagonia as well as the future of business?
Well, I think that, it was really exciting when Natura became, such a large public benefit corporation. I think, Paul Pullman has Ben & Jerry's in their portfolio, and I think they see that the future is really looking at a consumer making a choice to engage brands that they feel like share their values. And for Patagonia, we don't have any immediate plans to go public. That's we don't need the money to do that. We don't need we don't necessarily see that as being lined up with our mission right now. But I think that what the B Corporation legal form has done has helped us codify our mission and our values. And so if we were to do that at some point, it's very well spelled out, who we are and what we're about. I think it's absolutely critical, though, that the public markets make a shift and that they become focused on more than just quarterly earnings, because that model is outdated. It's destroying the planet. It's hurting people. And I think that the world needs a different model to exist on, going into the next 100 years. And I don't think we'll have a world to live in if we continue with that model.
Right.
Which is a lot of why we set up the venture fund, was to say, hey, we're going to prove that we can get great returns. They're not going to be, crazy returns, but they're going to be good returns that we can be proud of, and not compromise our values, and be a model for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of mission-driven companies, B Corps, other, even general companies, would be really interested in learning more. What was sort of the thinking behind the Patagonia Works structure into the five wholly owned subsidiaries. Is that correct? Yeah. And then, choosing the venture arm. Could you talk a little bit about, where should they be at financially, or what should they be thinking about when they're starting to say, hey, should we maybe follow a Patagonia Works model and create an in-house venture fund? Yeah.
Well, I think for us, I think every company is different. I don't think there's a cut and paste, model for any company or any group of owners or anything like that. I wish there was, but I think part of what it was sort of the guiding principle for us was to say, well, how can we extend our mission and values? And so we started there from a values based position and said, okay, well, what could we do that's complementary, and also what do we care about? And food has been a part of the culture here for 43 years. It's when you go out on adventures, you need food, and of course Yvonne's traveled the world, and he's tried a lot of different food. He's quite a foodie himself, and
he knows good backpacking food.
And he, so I think that was a good sort of extension for us, and we really dig deep into the supply chains that we're in, and so for agriculture for us, that's a deep dive. There's a lot of work going on in that area. And, we'll be busy with that for quite a long time, I think, and in terms of growing that business and making the impact that we want to make.
Right. And is there sort of is there a size or for a venture fund like yours, do you feel that there's a certain amount of money that it should be capitalized with, or is there sort of a margin that a company should have before? I know it's kind of hard to say theoretically, but just any
I think
thoughts
for
on
us,
that?
we looked at excess cash flow. It's like we know what it takes to run our apparel business. We've been doing it for 40 plus years. We had excess cash flow, and Yvonne didn't want any more cash than he has, and basically wanted to think about ways that we can use that to have more impact under the platform of Patagonia. And I think the lesson is, if you have a trusted brand, if you're uncompromising about your value system, then it can translate into other ventures where your customers will trust you and go on the journey with you. And I think that's been the case.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the challenges we've seen in some of the B Corps, for example, there's a large natural foods B Corp that we've been working with, and they recently lost one of their largest retail contracts primarily because of pricing, because the retailer didn't care that much about the fact that the B Corp had organic, fair trade, non-GMO supply chain, and paid living wages, because in particular, the customers didn't necessarily see that story. It's sort of behind the scenes. So the retailer chose to do the product with their own white label program. But, it seems like Patagonia doesn't have that same competitive problem. And maybe it's a food thing versus a clothing thing. Or do you have any thoughts about why the story is getting out more, or people trust the Patagonia's brand than other, brands?
Well, I think people are incredibly interested now about what they're putting in their bodies and the bodies of their families. And I think that, the industrialized nature of food, especially in the U.S. over the last 50 years, has been kind of alarming. I mean, when you look at the nutritional content of some of the things that we're eating, like bleached white flour and things like that, you realize that you're consuming, things that are not really healthy for you, or don't have much nutritional content. And I think that there's a great awareness and awakening around that, and I think people are looking at that deeply. I think there's also a real sense of folks wanting to grow their own food and have a closer connection to their food. And so I think I think they trust us as being able to take them on that journey and find the folks that are doing it right. And highlight them and help educate. And that's always been a big part of what we do is we tell stories, we educate, we engage, and I think that's that's hard to do in a like the description that you just described about you've got a retailer or a wholesaler and you've got tons of brands in there. It's hard to tell your story in that situation,
right?
So I think it's difficult, and I think that's partly the reason. I think the grocery model has partly been the reason that it's been hard to tell these stories.
Interesting.
And I think we're okay breaking out of that model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have people engaged with? I know you have the Footprint Chronicles, basically for folks who don't know, telling the story behind Patagonia's supply chain. I noticed on some of the Patagonia stuff I bought in the last few years, there's a QR code. Have you had much engagement with consumers around Footprint Chronicles and like people scanning your tags? Or is that sort of a lot less than just, that's a great jacket because the quality's high?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the customers that buy from us know who we are and think of us as a quality brand, a high-quality brand. Whether all of them dig deeply into the supply chain stories, I can't really say. I mean, we do get a lot of engagement on our Cleanest Line blog and in the core communities that we reach out to. But we don't do television advertising. We don't do most of the things that big consumer brands do. So that's okay with us. People find their way to us.
Yeah. Yvonne's not on Good Morning America. Or he might have been back in the 90s.
He actually was.
Okay.
He was on Good Morning America. I think it was last year or something, talking about our Warnware program. So
okay, I eat my words then. Wow. That's funny. Well, maybe that's guerrilla marketing then, right? You're not paying for it, at least.
Yeah, it's earned media.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to return a little, I'm really interested in this soil health conversation. It just seems, for example, up here, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's something called the Marin Carbon Project. Are you familiar with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know, they've been finding that a half inch of compost, if you apply that to 5% of California's surface area, which is basically the rangelands where cows graze in California, if you did that, it would store essentially as much water as the entire Sierra snowpack and sequester 1 metric ton of carbon per hectare per year. And this is a solution that exists today and can draw down carbon emissions down to pre-industrial levels. So it's so incredible to me. I'm not a permaculture guy. Some of my business partners are into permaculture. I want to learn more about it, but this, for someone on the outside, seemed like, why aren't we screaming this from the rooftops? It seems like just applying some compost and grazing it with cattle could be a huge carbon win. Yeah.
Well, a lot of folks are having this conversation. I would say it wasn't shouted as loudly from the rooftops at COP21. But there was mostly focus on investment in renewable energy, I would say. To offset fossil fuels, but I think that this story around carbon sequestration and what the science says, what the soil science says, is really compelling. It falls and it flags in the face of a lot of conventional agriculture practices, and I think that's where the battleground is, honestly.
Right, because it's not a monoculture with a lot of nitrate in the soil. So.
Yeah, and I think most organic farmers who use cover crops and have a lot of awareness about how their soils are enriched would say that they've known this for a long time.
Right.
That maybe the science is proving it, but they've known it for a long time.
Right.
So. But it's a very exciting thing to look at, and I think that there needs to be better understanding about that. And I think folks generally should be aware of that in their own practices and their own yards and gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And similar on the sort of fiber clothing side, some retailers I've seen recently have this movement towards micro lines of garments that are climate beneficial or net carbon sequestering. Is Patagonia experimenting at all with micro lines and net carbon sequestering products at all?
Oh, I mean, we've looking very much at regenerative and restorative, fibers, and we're doing some really interesting innovations and partnerships in terms of creating infrastructure and building out product. So yeah, I think it's certainly, I think the story is better understood and better told on a certain level through food for us. Although we've been doing a lot with regenerative grazing and our wool line, and I think that's a great example of that kind of product.
Right. Great. Well, just a few other questions for you. Who are you inspired by in your work? Like, who are you looking out to in the world and saying, wow, I really love what this person is doing or this organization?
Yeah, well, I'm inspired a lot by the BCorp community. I mean, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say I get to work with a guy I'm incredibly inspired with every day. Working next to Yvonnie and being able to really work directly with him every day is something that is a one of a kind experience, unrepeatable. I mean, I'll never have an experience like it. And so he's just amazing and inspiring to me every day. He's always pushing me. He's always asking the hard questions. So that's amazing. I mean, when I look at my cohorts in the BCorp community, I mean, Mary Powell at Green Mountain Power, I mean, took on this very entrenched kind of infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and completely proved the model. So she blows me away. I mean, people who are actually doing things, Perry Chen at Kickstarter, Chad at Etsy, Chad Dickerson, Satya Romanovich at Grant Thornton, all these people who are in the trenches doing the work, incredibly inspiring to me. I think, I got to meet Naomi Klein last year. That was a great experience and great to hear her talk and spend time with. And, so I think for me, it's the people that are in the trenches doing the work to create the next economy that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that I find inspiring because I do it every day. I know what heavy lifting it is.
Yeah. I'm surprised Yvonne is in the office with you every day.
Well, not every day. Maybe I exaggerated, but when he's here, he's here every day, and he's mostly spending a lot of time fishing.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you having business meetings out in the river, like fly fishing? Do you have a funny Yvonne story? I can start with one because I think he has great stories. So I was at a 1% for the Planet event up in Berkeley at the David Brower Center, and he was giving a talk at I think it was maybe the 20th anniversary of 1%, maybe, I'm not sure what the event was, maybe a 10-year anniversary. But he was talking about how he was really angry because he saw this thing in a store, which was a banana cutter. So you would put a banana into this metal thing and close it, and it would chop the bananas into little pieces. And he's like, has anyone heard of a knife? So it was just pure Yvonne. And I don't know if you have any similar funny stories.
Well, along those lines, we were at some sort of Thanksgiving event, and I was sort of complaining to him that I needed to get my knives sharpened, and he said, you know what, I'll show you how to sharpen your knives. And I brought them into the office the next day, and we went down into our cafe here, and he showed me how to sharpen a knife, and I have a wedding stone, and I now I sharpen all my knives by hand. So, that's Yvonne. He teaches you how to be as self-sufficient as possible.
Yes. Wow. I don't know if in the corporate finance world you would have had any knife sharpening experiences. But...
No. It's pretty great. I mean, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Great. Well, Rose, do you have any, maybe last question, do you have any requests to the community of listeners, any upcoming campaigns, activism, events, things you want to put out on our radar that we can help support Patagonia with?
Well, I think, I think everything the community is doing right now is moving us in this direction of transformative change. It's super exciting. I would say that it's becoming more and more clear to me that, the social part of our mission also needs to be amplified. I look at things like we're gonna do a little campaign here in support of the family leave legislation. We've had on-site child care here for 33 years. And 100% of our working moms come back to work after they give birth because they've got a supportive work environment here. We're going to be talking about that because I think it's something that's really missing right now in our corporate world in terms of supporting caregivers. So we're going to be talking about that, and it'd be great to have other companies kind of come on board and in support of that. And we're also doing a lot around, our kind of current conservation and environmental campaigns, which I think everybody can see if they go to our website or go on the Cleanest Line and, look at our blog and look at the different campaigns that we're working on right now. I guess I want to say too, Ryan, I think, business can revolutionize civil society, and if we're going to do it, it's going to be through this movement. And I think that the people that are out there doing the work every day are going to feel really good about the way they spent their work life. I think doing this work in the BCorp community. So I'm really excited that you're doing this show and that you're highlighting some of us out here in the trenches.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know anyone else I would rather interview than you right now. So I was joking that you're the only influencer I follow on LinkedIn. So for what it's worth, I don't think Yvonne would know that.
Yeah. Well, Wes Jackson at the Land Institute said if you're thinking about an idea that you can solve in your lifetime, you're probably thinking too small. So we just have to realize that we've got big ideas, we've got the imagination, we've got the force of business as a force of good, and I think, we're going to use it, and we're just going to get stronger because, there's, like I said, for me, every time I'm at college, I just get flooded by students talking about how this is the way they want to spend their time.
Right.
Is working in a company that shares their values and is doing good.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.